Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. In my previous video, I answered the question, can someone who's visually impaired drive? And I talked about my personal experience and journey a little bit about how I am capable of driving and I still drive to this day. In this video, I want to have a story time where I tell you about my experience of learning how to drive as someone who's visually impaired and my experience of obtaining my driver's license and working with people at the DMV and at the driving school. My name is Angela and I'm a visually impaired designer. So when I was a child, I always kind of assumed that I wouldn't be able to drive when I was older. This assumption came because a close family member of mine has a similar situation with low vision, and they have never driven because of their eyesight. So as you can imagine, as a child, I saw this as a situation that would also apply to me. Although I always, of course, wanted to be able to drive, it would be so nice to be able to go wherever I wanted and to have that independence. I think that's something that everyone wants. So as per usual, me and my parents would go to eye doctor appointments on a regular basis, usually once a year. And when I came close to the age where you can get your driver's license, which is 16 where I live, we asked my eye doctor if he thought it would be even remotely possible for me to be able to drive and meet the requirements you need for vision. So it turns out that he told me that I meet the minimum requirement of being able to see 20/40 or better in my better seeing eye. And I was super excited about this because, as I mentioned, I just didn't think it was going to even be possible at all. Even though the doctor confirmed and told me that I met all the requirements to be able to drive, I was super nervous about being able to see well enough while driving. This is definitely something I had to get over mentally in order to feel comfortable while driving. I didn't end up getting my driver's license until I was 18 years old, which was fine by me because I was able to take my time with learning how to drive and becoming comfortable. I did a typical route for my driver's education, which where I live is to take it as a class in high school. So you work with a teacher who is in charge of the driver's education class, and they take you around and help you with getting your driving practice, your hours, and then you work with your parents to get hours outside of class because you have to meet a certain amount of hours in order to receive your learner's permit and then also to get your driver's license. The second part of being able to get your driver's license is to be able to pass the test where you have to be able to say all the laws and knowing all the little details about driving on the road. The test part was super easy for me and I'm pretty sure I got like 98, 100% on that test. The only thing I was super nervous about was the actual driving. I wasn't sure how I was going to drive in certain situations like the dark or on busy roads. I was terrified to drive on busy roads. And it was super nerve-wracking driving with other students in the car along with my teacher because I didn't really want to openly talk about how I had a visual impairment because that's kind of awkward and felt weird. And I was afraid that my teacher would be like, oh, well, you shouldn't be driving because you're visually impaired. So it's kind of something that I kept to myself and didn't really bring up. I specifically remember the first time when we went out driving with my teacher. We live close to the mountains and he took me up and through the mountains. But at the time that we went, there was a lot of construction going on. So not only was it windy and narrow roads, but there was construction everywhere. And so it made it so that it was very scary and I had no idea what I was doing. He actually asked me on my first day of driving if I would rather go in the canyon or go on the highway. And I was terrified of going on the highway, especially merging and changing lanes due to my vision loss in my left eye. And so I opted out for the canyon. It sounded a little bit easier. Little did I know it was not going to be easier. In fact, that time when we were on the road, I actually encountered a deer the first time I was on the road. It was so scary, but luckily I was paying attention and I was able to slow down and let the deer pass, and then we went along on our way. I distinctly remember another time when we were driving with the same teacher where we were on a windy road and it was kind of hard for me to tell where the road was curving and where it was going into a parking lot because there wasn't really clear lines or signs or anything, so you kind of had to just tell by looking at the road itself. And I actually ended up accidentally going into the parking lot instead of following the road. And my teacher very firmly told me that if I were to have done that during the driver's test, I would have failed automatically because I went off the road. And after that, I was super nervous that I was going to make the same type of mistake again. Even though my teacher and I never really talked about my visual impairment, I could feel that he treated me differently than the other students who were in the group with me. I could tell he was hesitant to pass me off. I kind of find it funny still to this day that he passed me when he was feeling a little uncomfortable. I think it would have made sense if he just nicely told me he thought I needed a little more practice and then I could retake the test later on. But needless to say, I passed the test and I was on my way to get my driver's license. So as I said, I got my driver's license when I was 18 years old, but I didn't have a car or access to a car to be able to drive after I got my license. Soon after I went to college, and at that point I still didn't have access to a car, and so I didn't actually use my license very much for the first several years that I had it. I really wanted to be able to purchase a car, but because I paid for all my personal expenses on my own, it would take time for me to save up enough money to buy a vehicle. For the first 3 years of my college experience, I rode buses, I walked because I was close enough to campus, so I still didn't use a car. Finally, I wanted to get a car because I was working a job that was a little farther away. I was tired of riding a bus for an hour and a half every day when it would take me 20 minutes total to drive to and from work if I had a vehicle. I ended up getting a Mazda that was pretty old and it functioned, but it wasn't great, but it worked for my needs for a year or so. And at that point, I was actually really nervous about driving again because like I said, it had been several years since I got my license and I wasn't actively using it. It was like I had to relearn how to drive all over again. But this time it was on my own because I didn't have a class or anything to help me. However, ever since I've had my own car and it's been great to be able to be independent and drive and get to places on my own. If you want to hear more about the restrictions that I've put on my driving and how I go about that in feeling comfortable with when and where I'm driving, feel free to watch my last video. I'll go ahead and put a card up for you and put it in the description below for you. Alright, so I want to tell you a little bit about my experience of working with people at the DMV and my experience with the eye doctor. So as I mentioned, my eye doctor was fantastic. He had all confidence in my ability of being able to drive. I've had to renew my license twice since I got my first one, and both times he was totally fine with signing me off after making sure my vision didn't get worse or anything. The thing is, when I went to get my driver's license and to renew it, you have to do the eye test to make sure that you pass. And there's no way that I can personally pass the test that they have at the DMV. I tried it the first time and completely could not see anything in their little thing. So they have this little box where you look into it and there's artificial light that shows the letters and you're supposed to be able to see them. But the artificial light made it so hard for me to be able to see, especially with my condition with Aniridia. And so the alternate route from passing the test off there is you can go to your eye doctor and get a piece of paper signed saying that he approves you to drive. And so after figuring that out on the first time, I always just went to my eye doctor to get a paper signed when I went to my regular checkups instead of being embarrassed at the DMV and having to be like, yeah, I can't see that, this isn't gonna work for me. One time when we got our paper signed to pass off from the eye doctor, he didn't end up filling out the paperwork fully. He said that's how he normally fills it out and doesn't typically have a problem with it, but whoever was the worker I had that day at the DMV was being strict about the paperwork. And so he made us go back to the eye doctor to get it filled out. Me and my mom ended up going in the parking lot and just calling the eye doctor and having him fill out a new sheet and then forwarding it to us through email or a fax or something, so that we didn't have to drive all the way back to the eye doctor because it's kind of far from where we live. My eye doctor responded quite quickly, and so when we went back into the DMV, we got the same person again, and he questioned us saying, there's no way that you could have got that paperwork done so quickly, and he assumed that we had filled it out on our own. I was so frustrated that he would think that I would be so dishonest and try to work around being able to drive. That's not safe, and I'm not all about that. If my vision isn't good enough to drive, then of course I'm gonna find other ways to get around. Sure, it's gonna be sad, but that's just ridiculous that he accused me of lying and cheating the paperwork so that I could drive. That really did not feel good to me. Anyway, so my mom assured them that it was the doctor who sent it to us, and if they really needed us to, we could call the eye doctor then and there and they could talk to them. They finally approved us after a lady came over and kind of looked over it and said, okay, take it, it's fine. I felt so discriminated against in this moment of him assuming that because of my visual impairment, I was trying to cheat the system. Something that I worry about on a regular basis, which I try not to worry about, but it just naturally happens, is people judging me for the fact that I drive even though I have low vision. I know what I can handle and what restrictions I need to put on my own driving. But for some reason, it bothers me when people assume that I can't see anything and that I shouldn't be driving. Well, that's a little bit about my experience with getting my driver's license and discrimination when talking to the DMV. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel below, and turn on the notification bell. Comment down below what your experience is with being able to drive or not. I would love to hear from all of you. Thank you so much for your love and support. It really means a lot to me when you come watch my videos and you support my cause of trying to educate people about design and accessibility. I hope that you'll stick around, and I'll see you in my next video. Hope you have a great week. Bye!